Hello, and welcome to Ben Yo Chats. If you're curious about the world, this show is for you. What is it like to go deaf and then gain back your hearing? On this episode, I speak to Sophie Woolley. Sophie is a writer, performer, and theatre maker. We have been friends for a while, and I've learned a lot about deaf culture and from her personal journey and one as a creative. We have a meandering chat about her creative journey, how she felt she had to write about her story of going deaf and then gaining her hearing again via a cochlear implant. We recorded the podcast while Sophie is in Taiwan. She chats a little on her experience there and Taiwan's COVID management. This is not one of those pithy, highly edited bullet point like podcasts, but more like a long conversation between friends discussing the complexities of Sophie's experience. I was particularly intrigued by her thinking on what it might mean to be a cyborg and being augmented, and being part of both deaf culture and hearing culture. I'm still thinking about her comment about captioning AI being her friend, and how we can often simply criticize AI in a way we would not critique a human. If you enjoy the show, please like and subscribe, as it helps others find the podcast. Thank you. Be well. Hey everyone, I'm excited to be talking to Sophie Woolley. Sophie is a brilliant writer, performer, and theatre maker. Sophie, welcome.
Thank you, Ben, and thanks for calling me brilliant. I think you're brilliant as well.
Thanks.
We've known each other a long while now.
Quite a long while, and now across geographies, time, countries.
Yeah.
So one thing I'm really interested is you're really knowledgeable about hearing culture and also deaf culture, but to some degree you knew deaf culture first. I was wondering what was it like about finding out about aspects of hearing culture, or hearing culture sort of rediscovered after being so involved in deaf culture?
What was it like rediscovering hearing culture about after being immersed in deaf culture? Yeah, I'm going to unpick the question a bit.
Please do.
Firstly, I got a bit distracted because I've realised that I've been playing with the filters on the YouTube and my mouth looks really weird. So I'm going to try not to look at myself. It's too late to change it now. This is not my normal mouth on Zoom. Yes, just to unpick the question a bit, I grew up hearing. So I come from a deaf family, and our hereditary deafness is such that we go up hearing, and from adolescence we go deaf and we become profoundly deaf. So it's quite a strong deafness gene that runs back through the generations. And I think mostly people in my family have married hearing people, but the deaf genes are winning. So I grew up hearing, and my mum was deaf, and my younger sister, started going deaf before me. So it was always a big mixture. So I was very immersed in hearing culture, and the hospital decided I would not go deaf, and my sister was going deaf. They picked it up, but with me, it was happening a bit later. So I always had it in mind that I was the hearing one, and so like I said, I did hearing people stuff. That I was also aware of deaf culture and the deaf rights movement and the disability rights movement. So you might have seen that the Jack Thorne and Genevieve Barr drama that was on last night on BBC, which I haven't watched yet, about the disability rights movement. And that was all going on, and my mum was involved in that when I was a kid. And then I wasn't expecting to go deaf. And when people go deaf, all of them, if you know an elderly deaf relative or someone who's starting to go deaf, they will always sort of be the last to admit it. So I was doing that classic thing, even though I was coming from a deaf family, and people were saying, "Has your hearing got worse, Sophie?" Like friends. I was going, "Oh no, it's just staying how it is," because the hospital said that I'm, not getting deaf. So I went through all the different levels of deafness, and so I did. So deaf culture is not a monoculture. There's lots of different types of medical deafnesses, but also that in that deaf people have different cultures and requirements and access requirements. But what I found helped me, because I was doing well as a writer and performer. What helped me get to the next level professionally was when I kind of made the full adaptation, started using access to work and using sign language interpreters and palantypists, like you have in a court, you have the stenographers, they code in instantaneous verbatim captions. So I had those in meetings, and when I was in rehearsals or sometimes in auditions, I had sign language interpreters. So although we use sign language and speech at home, I wasn't fluent in sign language because I was more immersed in hearing culture, went off into the world doing that. So I was more becoming fluent in sign language when I started using sign language interpreters. So I guess that like when you learn a language and you can read it more than you can speak it, or more than you can write it. So I sometimes feel like that. Like I can watch my mates making their BSL videos on Facebook, chatting about, like this, I call it deaf web. So when people are just making comments in video in BSL, I can understand what they're saying, but I'm not doing that myself.
Wow, really interesting. What do you think people who really only know about hearing culture perhaps most misunderstand about deaf culture, or maybe something you'd like to explain to them? I hadn't fully appreciated, for instance, all the many levels of deaf culture, and it varies by geography as well as level and things like that. Nor, I think, until I came across it, well, I guess quite a few years ago, I really did not appreciate how rich and kind of amazing and poetic it is, with this huge, very rich culture. But I'd be interested in your reflections on what hearing culture really misses. I guess a lot of your friends would know, but I guess a lot of people haven't come across deaf culture very much.
What does hearing culture not notice about it?
Yeah, what do they miss,
Yeah.
or maybe don't appreciate? So something which you would love hearing culture people to understand about deaf culture, or maybe show them, if you want to find out more, this is something you'd be really really interested or excited to learn about.
Yeah. Because when you sometimes when so it's a really good question. Sometimes when someone asks me that question, it's my knee-jerk reaction is to go, all right, this is my chance to have a bit of a moan, and but that's not what you're asking.
You can moan as well if you like.
Yeah, that'd be very podcasty. Good old rant. So I think yeah, just I guess like it's always, or I guess people who get into deaf world will always have a moment, like a light bulb moment, when they discover something and it makes them want to get to know more deaf people, or learn to sign or something. And there's nothing to beat when you walk into a room and everyone's signing. And that, yeah, if you get the chance to walk into a room where everyone's signing and you don't know the language, then yeah, it's, or I guess if you go and see a play that's all in sign language, and where the audience is mostly deaf, it's quite something. So it's another language that's going on in different countries, and in Britain, the art scene, the deaf art scene, and the deaf filmmaking scene, and deaf TV scene is really, really strong. So there's lots of opportunities where you could go and I'm trying not to say the words another world, like it's alien or something,
because it's our world.
Yeah. So that, yeah. So yeah. Yeah. So what people often ask me on the moan front, people, the standard things that people will always say to me when they find out I'm deaf, and they might be able to talk to me about sign languages. So it's international, right? So everyone always says, "Oh, is it in the language? Is it international?" And it's not. It's not only English people that say that. So English-speaking people think that English is international because it is. But there are also people who their first language isn't English, but who also ask me this question because I've been around the world, and then they'll go. So the international, it's an international question, but sign language has, it's like people in France speak French, and people in Taiwan speak Taiwan sign language. So it's an international question, and then the next question that people ask me is not a question, it's a complaint. So people say, "But that's so stupid. Why isn't it should be international? It should be an international language." And there is some more information that you can give to people about all of that, but it's once they've started complaining about how stupid sign language is because it is international, I don't feel like telling them that, you know, because I'm speaking to you actually from, I'm in Taiwan at the moment. I'm not in London where I normally live. So when I thought I want to try and meet some deaf people in Taiwan, and I googled deaf people in Taipei, and there's a cafe about half an hour away that's run by deaf people. So I went there knowing that if I go in there and start signing, I will be able to have a chat with them a bit easier than the people speaking Mandarin or Taiwanese or Hakka or whatever here. Because I can do some handshapes, and I know some signs from other country. And so I went in to buy a coffee, and I said I'm deaf, and then I signed. I've got a cochlear implant, and these positions, they recognised. So they came outside because it's COVID restrictions. And at the time I went to visit that cafe, the people, you had to go into the cafe, order the coffee and wait outside because it's a really small coffee shop. So they had to come and outside, the deaf couple or two deaf people. And we had a chat, and we had a basic chat, and we were doing some typing on the phone. on Google Translate. And so we were able to have a chat a bit faster than if we were having two languages we didn't know. And there is an international sign language that gets used.
Excellent.
Sign language is not international. Like there's an Esperanto.
One of those really, really annoying questions. Maybe some impressions of Taiwan as you're there would be really fascinating, because I think you mainly grew up in London, like around maybe Harlesden, northwest London, actually not too far from where I am. But I think maybe first born in Glasgow, a little bit of time in South Africa, and obviously you've been around the world. I'd be interested in your impressions on how it's like in Taiwan at the moment. Obviously, we still have pandemic happening, but maybe either some of their everyday life or deaf culture, even food, transport, shopping, anything you kind of think, wow, this is really different about Taiwan, or I really like this. This is something we should bring to London, or vice versa. Be interested in your impressions.
Yeah, it's so the first thing you're struck with when you come to Taiwan is the COVID theatre, the pandemic theatre is different. And when I say theatre, I mean like security theatre. But it's not for show. It's proper. So it's like they're doing in many ways. It's like they're handling the pandemic in the way I want it to be handled. But that makes it quite difficult to get into the country. So when I arrived, I had to do 2 weeks in quarantine. And so when you arrive at the airport, there's loads of people in hazmat suits, and you have to wait and get a COVID test, and then go in a special taxi straight to the hotel. And in the hotel reception staff are wearing the PPE. And I missed a bit before I got in the taxi. The taxi driver, who's wearing PPE as well, sprays the whole of me, disinfects me, and sprays all of my luggage. And then and the windows are down. So it's all proper. I'm trying to remember if there's anything else that's done proper about coming into the country. There's lots of really, there's a digital system, so I have to register a health form, and then every day I'm texted by the CECC, so the Command Centre for Epidemic Control. I've said the acronym words wrong, but they text me a message, and I have to reply saying I'm well, and the CECC says thank you, we care about you. So there's that whole automatic system, and then a police officer also calls as well. And so eventually you get out of quarantine, and at the moment there's a full mask mandate, so everyone's wearing masks. And sometimes people say, oh, it's lots of restrictions in Taiwan, but really it feels like a layer of kind of stress is removed, because you don't have to think about it. Everyone wears a mask and everyone just gets on with it. So there's no awkwardness either way. So you wear a mask and you can go into a restaurant and take it off. And there's no COVID. I haven't looked at the stats, but people aren't dying and there's no COVID. But they have an issue with I think it's something like 45% of older people over a certain age haven't been vaccinated.
Ah,
So there's the hesitancies with the pensioners here. So there's so the long quarantine periods. I think they're kind of Taiwan might be looking at Hong Kong, where there's also a lot of people who didn't get vaccinated, and now Hong Kong's got a very bad pandemic going on. So it's really different in terms of yeah, it just feels like a kind of pandemic.
and how has that changed how you viewed the arts and culture or restaurants and food? Or you give me the impression that everyone's just getting on with it, so it's a normal part of life. But I'd be interested if how different Taiwanese culture or food seems to you versus your experience in London.
The culture and the food, yeah. So when I first came here last year, I came out of quarantine, and they did have an outbreak. They got the Alpha variant, the British one, and so all of the arts closed, so I didn't see very much. And so I haven't seen very much, but I've seen some incredible visual arts, and I've mainly been educating myself about the food. So I go to the night market, and also I live near the night market that's open in the day as well, and that's really dazzling in different ways in the day and the night. So there's the fish stalls, the meat stalls, then vegetable stalls, and then stores where that are full of all the different kinds of tofu, and then stalls that I think are full of many types of tripe.
Wow.
And I really wish I knew more about. I don't want to eat tripe, but I'd like to ask them questions, but I don't want to eat it. And then, but sometimes you do order something that you think is just a vegetable soup, right? Or have bits of tripe in it. You just order the wrong thing. So you do get to experience some tripe accidentally. And then there's jellies and puddings that initially I thought, well, I'm like when I was in quarantine, I ordered some puddings, and the consistency of food is very different, and the puddings are not, and cakes are not as sugary. So at first I was really unused to the food. So I thought, well, I don't know if I'm ever going to get to like them food, but now I'm getting to like crave the different foods. And I really like the red bean paste stuff, and the congees, and the jelly is made of different plants. So instead of being made of animal, the jelly is made of things like, the other day I had some made of figs. The jelly's made of rubbing fig seeds together, and it's like jade jelly, it's called.
Yeah. It's very different textures, the food
Yeah.
around Taiwan. It's really fascinating. So I have a question here. I know none of us like to be pigeonholed, particularly in terms of our creative work. But you did a whole show, augmented, kind of about sort of deafness, or finding out about that. I'd be interested in your process for that. And I think you've spoken also about a little bit of the moments when your cochlear implant was first turned on, and and how that all happens. But so I was wondering whether you'd like to comment on that, and also your process and thinking behind creating your show Augmented, and using sort of your own life as kind of source material for theatre making.
Yeah, so so the, like you said, the show is based on my personal experience. So I went totally deaf over 20 years, and I thought I was going to just be deaf for the rest of my life, because I knew about cochlear implants and I thought they weren't very good. I just had a lot of prejudices again and fears about them, and so the original idea for doing a show about someone who becomes what I call a deaf cyborg came from the moment I realized I was a deaf cyborg, and the world had to know about it. And so the process started in 2013 when I was switched on in the hospital. But it took me a while, because it's autobiographical, to find the language for telling the story, because I kind of, there's three audiences that I was thinking of when I was trying to write the show. So there's hearing people, and there's deaf people who are not implanted, and then there was people who are implanted, or people that I thought might be like me and might it's life-changing. So I didn't want to be an implant pusher, but I just thought there's just not anything in culture about that's realistic about implants. It's always a kind of there's a lot of old-fashioned dramas about it, and saying, oh, it's controversial, and you know, and showing people being unhappy with their implant. And there was a lot of joy about it. But when I thought about making a show that showed joy about implants, I also felt ashamed, and I thought this would be quite oppressive to a lot of deaf people who can't implant or don't need to implant. And then I realised that was a potential conflict of the show. So it's almost it's a show about me, my progress as a writer, my journey as a writer, and also my journey as a performer, and what it takes out of me to tell this story, because I'm pulled in different directions by my duties to the different audiences. So it's like the hearing audience is easy, because they understand the standard story. It's you go deaf, you want to go hearing again. That's but really I haven't gone hearing again, because in the story of Augmented, I can't tell the story of going hearing until I tell the story of going deaf. And it's a story that the show Sophie doesn't really want to tell, the story of going deaf, because it's a traumatic journey, and she wants to present herself as a writer hero, as do I. I don't want to be a pitiable character, or make deafness. I'm proud of my deafness. It's very complicated, so I have to do anything about it. And so in the play, it's about I work with Sarah Dickinson, a dramaturg, and a brilliant director called Rachel Bagshaw, who implicitly understood where I was coming from, because she also has acquired disability. and so she's been through a transformation. And so they helped me and encouraged me to dig into the complexity of the story rather than make it, that someone gets switched on, they cry, and then everything's brilliant. Because like when I in a show, you see, when I got switched on, my deaf family were there, and they were subverting it. It was kind of family chaos, and my mum's hearing dog was farting and making everyone laugh. And so just to explain, my mum is deaf and she has a hearing dog, and that's a working dog for deaf people. And so it wasn't a kind of romantic moving switch on, but it was a really serious moment for me. And yeah, so there's pathos in that moment that I wanted to show that it, not make it cheesy, because it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I love about the work is it's really complex and shows that these things are not like our fairy tale myths. They are a story about being human, which has all of these complexities about it. One thing we've talked about, maybe on the little bit more of the positive, surprising side, was when you picked up incidental sound again. And I think I had not appreciated, as a hearing person, how incidental sound infuses everything. And also in your show, you talk about toileting, and how toileting is a visceral thing, but actually sound is very much associated with it. And so that also is something I hadn't appreciated.
Can I interrupt you? Because this
Sure.
is a deaf thing I have to do. Can I just interrupt you? I sometimes I have to stop someone if I didn't understand a word, or I think I heard a word and I think that can't be right. And did you say toileting?
Yes.
Toileting, when I'm toileting.
So the sound of urination.
That's it. Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah,
Okay.
the sound of urination,
Yeah.
which I was just an incredible moment in the just in the show, and I hadn't because I this was just for me, just I hadn't really appreciated what we have as a sort of hearing audience. And this was also around incidental sound and hearing about that. So I was just interested in, was it well, I guess the thing about incidental sound coming back, and how that was for you.
Yeah, this is why I'm glad you pick out those details, because they are details, and that's why it's so important for deaf writers and deafened people and deaf people who have had implants to write these stories, because then you get the specifics, and the specifics are more interesting than or just as important as the general drama that people see from afar. But you've got these really moving or funny sound details that really give people more empathy than a kind of generalization that someone's got from a consultant and then got a hearing writer to write it. So yeah, so the bit about the shock of when I went deaf, and still must have been still being in denial when I was profoundly to totally deaf, and then one day realizing, wow, I can't hear myself. I'm on my way. I can't hear that anymore. So that's gone. So I think things disappear, and yeah, that's quite philosophical, isn't it? Not being able to hear what you're doing, and then so the detail is really important.
And I guess on that philosophical level, I detect a sort of certain fear amongst many people about this idea of being augmented, or a cyborg. I guess we've got the idea that we can have artificial limbs is, people I think are more at peace about that. But when it's to do with things like hearing or maybe brain or maybe other sorts of things, and I thought that was one thing really great about your story, is that at the heart of it, I thought, well, we're still really human. We might have other bits, and I'm sure sort of when glasses came along, people thought, oh, that's an extra bit that we put on our body, and maybe that's the way that some of the human body is going. It might have bits which are not as biological, but I don't think that really makes us any less human. And I thought on that level is something that the story really resonated with me. I mean, was
Yeah.
that one of the? I felt that was one of the underlying messages. Is that something you think about in general with where this has got to?
Yeah, yes. And also, I think I need to write another show or film about it, because I want to dig deeper into the duality of that. So yes, when I got switched on, I realized I hadn't been switched on as a Frankenstein monster. I had a sense of horror that other people will have, that stigma of seeing someone with a thing on the side of their head. And like I felt that horror in advance, and having someone in it's very invasive, like drilling into my skull and stuff. And then realizing that it gave me access to parts of myself, my identity that I hadn't been doing for a long time, and people close to me saw a transformation in me. So it's, yeah, I find it difficult to talk about, and that's why I had to write about it, because I'm trying not to say oppressive things. Yeah, it's really because I am from the deaf community. I self-edit, so that's why I have to write things that are really hard to say. And the other thing what I wanted to mention about the duality is, as well as, yeah, we're human, just because I'm got this freakish thing in me, but also really immediately when I got switched on, I had all of that. Yeah, oh, I'm back. She's back. The old me, that also, and there's a new me. I'm a cyborg. So things sounded very strange at first, and science fiction, and I loved all that, and I miss all that liminal period of weird sound. But I also feel very very appreciative of AI and machines, and the sound of machines, and I'm not a transhumanist, but I wonder if there's a kind of side of this sort of future humanism that's not the dodgy version. There's a book that I want to get that I think I can only order by the post, that's just being published by a caviar, and it's a computational philosopher. And so I saw a friend like put the post about it, when people put a picture of the book they like. So I looked up that writer, and he's talking about other forms of intelligence. So so I looked up an essay he'd done, and he was critiquing humanism, and as arrogant, and saying, well, why is AI so bad? why are we so arrogant to just dismiss that? And I do, and there is something in that, I think, not having read his book yet, but so I'm going to explore that some more, because what I find happens is people have this knee-jerk response to that. That's like, oh, AI, it's really a evil force, and there are really bad things happening in computers and AI, because of they've been developed by non-diverse teams and things, but that's not what people are being knee-jerk about. They're just like, I'll be on a Zoom and I'll say, I'm just going to put the automatic captions on so that I've got a transcript, and people sometimes switch them on and start criticizing the AI captions, and that's kind of allowed because the AI is not human. But I'm a cyborg and the AI is my friend.
Yeah,
So someone like, people wouldn't criticize my sign language interpreter. I mean, some of them, you know, didn't always behave well, but with the interpreter. But it's, you know, that's more understandable. They empathize at the ethics of that. But yeah, I've got a cop on about that.
yeah. I mean, I think that's fascinating, and I think this gives you such brilliant insights because of these dualities. You know, understanding deaf culture, understanding hearing culture, understanding AI and robotics, as well as understanding, you know, not. So I'd be really interested in hearing you write more about these topics. And I mean, I guess with this duality, what I'm hearing though is that you you still feel part of deaf community and deaf culture as well as part of hearing. You haven't lost that in being able to hear, or do you feel also a little bit of a sense of loss, because when we gain one thing you lose another? And you talked about that liminal state where you have, you know, a set of sounds which you only have in that state, and you know, you pass out of it, you lose something. I'm interested, is that a tension in the duality, or do you find you sit in a balance that no, you can accept being part of both cultures, even
Yeah,
if maybe both
yeah.
cultures, like, they're a little bit antagonistic sometimes because they don't understand the other half as well?
It's really been beautiful. It's really been a beautiful journey. So the play focuses on some of the tension, so of you know, my hearing and deaf relatives, their response to me suddenly changing and them having to adapt to the new me. So there's a sort of sense of loss maybe when I get home back, but over time, I've learned that yeah, it's not a loss. So I have more time, so I can do more work for the deaf good, and rather than like be focused so much on myself, because I used to have to spend a huge amount of time, because I was a freelancer, going from one job to the other in sourcing access workers, or being very tired from using access workers or lip reading. So now I have the hearing privileges is not having that fatigue on and having more time. And so and also in real time being able to have more instant access and hearing privilege in the world, the anger about that doesn't go away. The anger about the injustice against deaf me, who didn't have this, doesn't doesn't go away. I'm not going around feeling angry all the time, but it's, you know, it's in the core, so I can't walk away. In principle, and in theory, sorry, I can do a thing that me and my sister used to talk about, well, you know, hearing people who can sign, they can still just walk away. Like, and if you're deaf and there's something, you can't walk away from being deaf. But like, I sort of can do that. I could walk away. But I don't think I do. So I'm still very much I'm still very much involved in deaf things as well as hearing things. And there's things I do behind the scenes. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
so I really want to spend more time being a cyborg.
I see that. I don't know if you see it the same, but that you are a bridge between these cultures, and therefore you can advocate more effectively for deaf culture. And, you know, until I came close to people who had accessibility needs, and I think I don't even still fully appreciate it because I don't have those needs myself, about how difficult it is. And there's a whole different sets of these accessibility needs that people who don't have them, who are in the majority, simply ignore, not necessarily out of bad intent, but just from ignorance. And I think the more we have kind of these bridging things, and exploring that, is a positive. What maybe about thinking about being a cyborg or AI and things, what would you like to explore more about the AI thinking or the kind of machine thinking? Is it this idea that we could treat AI bits perhaps a little bit more like we consider humanity, or what part of that duality is most interesting to you at the moment?
No, I don't know if we have to anthropomorphize the robots, but maybe we can learn from them.
Yeah. Cool.
But I'm going to do some reading and thinking. I also want to get my my external processor upgraded, and I'm interested to see how that will what will happen with the sound mapping of that. That's a very technical thing. So whether my sound map will change, will I have more control over it in real time, or will the company be controlling the sound worlds? Because it's amazing. It makes you appreciate how many parallel universes there are, because each time I get a new map, I think, oh, this is a great version to hear the world in. You know, you tweak it in the hospital, and then sometimes I come away and I have to go back and go, no, that's wrong. It's too bassy. But then I get the version I've got at the moment, I'm really happy with. But there are still things that are difficult to hear. So there's a lot of technical things that I want to do. And that's more of a personal thing about work on the hearing. So there's things that I think I'll never be able to do that then I can do. So recently I was listening to some hip hop. So I don't listen to as much music as I want to, because I'm a writer. If I'm listening to music, I'm Bluetoothing it direct to my brain. I get too distracted. And I thought I'd never be able to understand hip hop lyrics with my implant, but now it's becoming clearer.
That's amazing how you can change, or how the sound world changes with your sound map, and you can sort of upgrade it or change it over time. Has the sound of your own voice change that much, uh, for you over time, and these different processings, and how do you feel about the sound of your own voice? Do you have a do you have a changing relationship with it, or is it just that? I guess there's useful things, right, with your voice, or how you can voice in terms of acting and things, and changing voice. But has it
Yeah.
changed over time, and you kind of interested in that?
Yeah, that's another thing I want to do about the cyborg thing is I want to do some more acting, and I think for that to happen, I am going to be writing my own parts, and maybe I don't know, it'll be a cyborg story, but might have to be. But my voice has changed in terms of when I was going deaf, I was doing lots of different voices in plays, different accents. And I was working with Gemma Fairley, brilliant director. I was really into doing that. And then I was beginning to be cast as deaf characters and on TV and radio. And since I got my implant, I haven't been getting so much of that work. My voice changed after I got the implant. I didn't work on it, but it changed because I was able to monitor my speech. But I am learning Mandarin in Taiwan, and that just feels incredible to me. And I'm learning it. The teacher's got a mask on, so I can't lip read her. So this isn't the case for all people with implants, but for me, I can follow speech without lip reading, and that it's not easy learning Mandarin or hearing it when it's muffled. You know how everyone's deaf in a pandemic because all the speech is muffled by the masks. So that's it's working on my voice is different when I'm speaking Mandarin. I wish there was more time to learn other languages, and I wonder if I can use that in my work. I hope someone is making a film where they need a Londoner who speaks a little bit of Mandarin.
Yeah, that would be great. So maybe the last couple of questions is, do you have any advice for people, either advice from how you lived your life, or perhaps advice for people thinking about having implants, or those interested in deaf culture? So yeah, any thoughts or advice that you might have?
So any advice about deafness or getting implants?
Yeah, definitely. Or just general life advice. It doesn't have to be something specific, but final thoughts.
Yeah, I really think specifically it's really important with deafness. So I wanted to say more specific things in our chat. And one of the things is that yeah, all deaf people are different. I grew up in a family where we are deaf, and we sign and speak, and sign language has been very empowering for us, and so cochlear implants. One thing that's been happening in the last 6 months, and I'm not sure why, is people have, in working context, people have been asking me if I want them to book me a sign language interpreter. And I haven't used sign language interpreters since 2012. That was the last time I used them at work, when I was working on a play for the Cultural Olympiad. And then I got the implant, and I found out that I could just I just had to use one access, that's the implant. But what's been happening in the last 6 months is people, maybe people in the pandemic have been like seeing a lot of access on the public Zooms and things, and so the question has changed. So instead of asking me what access do you prefer, people have been asking, do you want me to book you a sign language interpreter? And because I come from a signing speaking background, it's sort of I can take it, but I just think for there's a lot of deaf people who go deaf later in life and they don't sign, and it's going to be quite difficult for them to be asked that question. So the question to ask people is, do you have any access requirements? Is there anything I can book? Just something more general in that context, because people have all different specific requirements.
That's a good question to know. And actually, overall, I mean, that's probably the kind way we should be asking sort of everyone. Do you have accessibility needs? Can I help you with something, rather than sort of pigeonhole people into a particular way?
Yeah, there was a producer that I work with who's really good, and he on the access front, and I think he has a sign off after his name. Some people have pronouns and things like that, and he has the thing after his name on the emails saying if there's anything access wise that I can organise, let me know. I can't remember the wording. So that's on the sign off, and that's so useful, I think, for a lot of people who might be have to pluck up the courage to ask, because it's difficult to know when everything's online how it's going to land sometimes, or how it's going to land. So a lot of them, the labour that people have when they're first becoming deaf, is fear of asking for what they need. Fear of looking weak or something. So the advice I give to someone who's going deaf, or just going into the working life, is that you have to sort of take the bull by the horns, and be assertive, and ask for what you need. But I think get your foot in the door first, and then be organised about what you want, because you're gonna need X, Y, and Z access at some point. And if you ask for it late, then that's not a collaborative approach to your access. So you sort of be organised about it at the start. I used to organise all of my own. I think other people organise it for people now. It's a lot more, access to work is more difficult to get. I don't use it anymore, but I understand that it's more difficult to get. So if people are an employer, they should be doing some of the work to get access to work for their workers.
Okay.
I feel like I'm straying a bit from my remit, which is as a Bohemian writer and actor.
No, I don't think that strays from your remit at all, as that. And I think that's really useful, actually, advice, and actually pretty practical. And any advice or thoughts for creatives, maybe reflecting on your own personal creative and writer performer journey?
I made my own shows, and plowed my own path, and I wasn't working for the big companies at first. I was just sort of getting up in pubs and clubs and teaching myself. So if you don't have training, then that's quite a good way to develop your own voice. if I go back and do it again, I would learn some craft and structure a bit earlier on, and because that's expected, and it also speeds up the writing process. And
Great. And what future shows or shows where we can see some of your work? Because I think the Deaf Faker series is still available on YouTube. Is that right? Where we can see some of your work? But yeah, any particular work you're proud of that we could look at, and future projects that you're interested in working in, which might be coming up?
yeah, you can. I've been busy in the pandemic, writing for EastEnders, and the I'm proud of the episode that was last on in October. So I think that was the 12th of October or something like that. And so if you go on my website, sophiewoolley.com, there's a link to that, the EastEnders episodes. And I also starred as a villain in a short film called Veneer by Jean Sinclair, who's a brilliant deaf actress and writer, who also worked with me on Augmented. So that's on BSL Zone. You can probably get to that from my website as well. And yeah, I've got a YouTube channel, and I did a kind of short experimental film with Dudley Rees and Told by an Idiot in 2021, I think, or 2020. Oh dear. It's all a blur, and that was called Best in Lockdown, and it was quite strange to make that because I was using my technology, and the director was in another room, so we did it all very safely. So he gave me instructions and questions through a gadget that just beamed sound to my brain. So that's called Best in Lockdown. And the other advice I wanted to give, going back to the other question,
Yeah, please do.
Was yeah, it's don't be hard on yourself. That's what I have to tell myself.
Yeah, but I guess be kind. Don't be too hard. Be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember you telling me quite important to try never to get repetitive strain injury. So these other little practical things. That's again, don't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah. I got really, when my play Augmented, when it did 9 shows and then the tour had to stop because it was March 2020, and it was like, I couldn't work all of the time because we couldn't go out, and I did the whole workaholism thing, but I didn't get RSI.
Yeah.
So I've got my desk all set up really well now these days. Yeah, I get RSI.
Excellent. So any other final thoughts you'd like to share? Advice or something I haven't covered that you think actually I'd quite like to chat about that?
Yeah. I think go to your mingles if you can. That's if I were still on the advice thing,
yeah,
they're really good.
Yeah, meeting other people. I think yeah, for me, I feel I've like learned so much from your work and just following what you've been doing over time. So I find it's really fascinating and important. And so thank you for being brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Great.
It's really good to hear that all the way over in Taiwan. Thank you.
Great.
I hope I get to see your shows when I get back to London soon.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Sophie.
Thank you.
If you appreciate the show, please like and subscribe, as it helps others find the podcast.